Hey everybody, welcome back to James Draws Everything, the James Draws Everything show. And you may be asking, James, what's the plan? Well, the plan is to draw every country in the world's flag. No, what's the plan for today? Well, my man, I'll tell you the plan. The plan for today is to draw Sudan, my man. So we are going back into Africa, and we are getting closer and closer to the finish line, and we're going to be drawing Sudan. And with that said, we already did South Sudan, so a lot of this episode we kind of already covered, because these countries, of course, are very similar, and the only reason why there is a South Sudan, well, we'll get to that, but it's due to a very, very recent split. Due to a very long-running conflict in that region. Newest country in the world, South Sudan. Sudan, not as newest, right? But their history is going to overlap quite a bit. So go check out that episode too if you want to learn a little bit more about South Sudan. What about just regular Sudan, right? Sudan Classic, as I like to call it. Well, probably home to some of the oldest civilizations in the world, right? You got the ancient Nubian people that lived there, some early Egyptian kingdoms that took over the Nubian kingdoms. The earliest weapons are actually found here, right? There's archaeological evidence of some skull crushing that happened in this part of the world. Kind of like, what is it, that scene in 2001 A Space Odyssey, right? Where all the apes are beating each other up with, they first discover, using bones or whatever. Well, Sudan's pretty much where that happened, right? The earliest evidence of one of the oldest tricks in the book, the old club to the head. That's Sudan. And so very early on, this is where you kind of get a lot of like the we was kings stuff, from Pan-Africanists and things like that. It's because the Egyptians actually took over these people, right? So the Sudanese aren't the same as the Egyptians, but because of that, there's a lot of kind of history that's sort of claimed as theirs. No, the Sudanese were the Nubian people, a little different than the Egyptians, who were more considered Arabs. But there was a lot of early kingdoms there, though, and when the Egyptians kind of fell, there was another Nubian kingdom, the Kush. Then that leads to Assyrians coming in, bringing in Christianity. The Romans as well do that. Some Ethiopians invade, then Arabs. And of course, and after like the 6th, 7th century, that's where you start to see Islam in this region. However, the southern part of Sudan remains Christian, and that's a real big sort of reason why there's a South Sudan today. So, South Sudan Christian, Sudan Classic, mostly Islamic, Muslim, right? So, going to be button heads there a little bit. So when Arabs start settling more in this region, that's where Islam really takes a foothold, and it basically almost becomes completely Muslim by like the 19th century. You do have an Egyptian occupation again. We're talking more modern times now. Early 19th century, and Egypt was basically like a client state of the British. So you have some resentment of the Sudanese people against like both the Arabs and the British that are there. And then in the end of the 19th century, there's like a joint British-Egyptian agreement to govern Sudan, but basically the British did it, right? So they agreed with the Egyptians to do it, but the British said, you know what, we'll share it with you, but not really. So it basically became a British colony. And the name Sudan was actually brought there by the Arabs much earlier. Sudan basically means black. And there was, when the Ottomans arrived as well, they had a little bit of, some anti-British sort of leaders there as well that kind of, merged with like the Sudanese people. There was a man named Muhammad, not that one, but he kind of saw himself as one, right? So he was like, was it the Mahir or whatever? The supposed to be like the modern prophet. He was an early Sudanese leader, like in that kind of colonial period, sort of kickstarting those ideas for like Sudanese sort of independence, which does happen much later. Sudan gains independence from the Anglo-Egyptian co-rule in 1956. Mostly since then it's been military regimes, heavy Islamic tint on those, right? So caused a lot of resentment with the South Sudanese people. And this kicks off a war that basically lasts for the entire second half of the 20th century. Right, so yeah, you got two civil wars between the North and the South. Right, the North Muslim mostly, and then the South mostly not Muslim. Right, the North as well is mostly a lot of like Arabic people, where the South is more like your your ancient Nubians, like what you'd think of as like African peoples. So the first civil war that kicks off, right, it doesn't end until 1972. Very short peace, because another one breaks out in 1983. So you had a couple years there where nobody rocked the boat, but it was still simmering, right? They left the crock pot on, and then the temperature just kicked right back up. So they had another civil war that lasted pretty much until like the early 2000s. That did kind of wind down a little bit, in the early 2000s as well. You kind of got to think of what's going on in the rest of the Arab world as far as like the war on terror. So that's causing issues here as well. You see a lot of terrorist cells start to pop up, right? 2005, there's a peace agreement between the North and the South, and they give them the southern Sudan. They gain a level of autonomy, kind of like a test run for 6 years to see if they can govern effectively, like kind of like sort of to give them like a roadmap to independence, which independence they do gain in 2011. But as far as peaceful coexistence, that really hasn't happened. So they've yet to fully implement like any kind of economic or security agreements. There's still border disputes, conflicts in Darfur, southern Kordofan, and the Blue Nile region. They've basically been raging since like 2003. There's been a president there in Sudan, Omar Hassan Ahmad al-Bashir. He reigned for about 30 years, as a dictator there. And he was in 2019, he was forced out by the military, right? So stop me if you heard this one before, right? Military coups in Africa. And they go through a transition period. where they install a new guy, Abdallah Hamdouk al-Kanini. He was elected to serve as the prime minister of the transition government. Then he gets ousted in a coup in 2021. And then there's basically no head of state, so it's kind of run by like a council of ministers and civilian members of like there's of their government. And that actually led to Hamdouk getting briefly reinstated, but then he resigns again in 2022. And now there's a general there that basically doesn't really hold like an official title, but he is the de facto head of state. General Abd al-Fattah al-Burhan Abd al-Rahman. So he's the chair of the Sudan Sovereign Council and commander-in-chief of the Sudanese Armed Forces. So, a lot of turmoil, right, since gaining independence in, 1959. Due to that, ranks very low and like basically all metrics, Human Development Index, GDP per capita. But yeah, it's kind of one of those stories, right, where would this place be better off if it was still controlled by like the Egyptians or a more stable government. This is also not really one of those situations where like in the Civil War you can say that like, oh well, maybe Sudan Classic ain't doing so hot, but South Sudan, they're doing all right. No, not really. They're actually both there's a lot of problems in both currently, and if I had to if you had to send me to one of these countries, sorry guys, I know James does everything, doing what he does, angering countries, getting his passport revoked. If I had to flip a coin to go to Sudan or South Sudan, I really wouldn't have a preference. I think they're both just about the same, and both places that I probably wouldn't like too much. But with that said, speaking of I kind of like the flag, right? It looks similar, right? We've seen a lot of these flags with this kind of color scheme. Very reminiscent of a lot of Arab flags. Like you can see Iraq right next to it, same colors, same lines too, right? I borrowed a red line, a white line, and a black line from Iraq, and then I just I jumbled up these letters, mushed them into a triangle, and then squeezed it over to the side, and there you go, instant Sudan. So that's the recipe for if all you got in your cupboard is an Iraq flag, that's how to make a Sudan one. So with all that nonsense being said, James, what does this flag mean? So, it's based on the Arab Revolt flag of World War I, right? We already know that. The colors, the red, that's the struggle for freedom. White is for peace, light, and love. And black represents the people of Sudan, right? Because Sudan does mean black. And then green is the color of Islam. But, not just Islam, it is also the color of agriculture, right? So all those good greens, eat your veggies, kids, grow up big and strong. But that's not it either. It's also the color of prosperity, right? That ching-ching, that green, those papers, right? Does Sudan have green money? I actually don't know. I know we do, right? The United States does, but I'll have to check in on that. So I'll get back to you. And actually, probably, no, I won't. So put it in the comments if you know what Sudan money looks like. But with that said, while you're putting that in the comments, don't forget to like. Don't forget to throw in another comment, and don't forget to subscribe as well. And hey, look at this. We finished another page. So guys, if I did my math right, we have one more full page left to go before we are done with this project. And then I think we got a couple more that we're going to have to just throw on an extra page. But again, with that said, I will catch you on the next episode.